Would you trust a product just by reading about it? Probably not. Welcome to the Donovan Digital Podcast, where we explore the strategies and insights that help architectural building product and service companies build brand awareness, create engagement, and establish authority in the industry. Today, we're diving into search engine optimization, or SEO. SEO is often misunderstood, with many companies chasing keywords or quick fixes, or paying companies a lot of money about something they don't have a clue about. Understanding how SEO works and the strategy behind it can be a game changer for ensuring that your target audience finds you online. To help us unpack what really matters in SEO today, I'm excited to introduce my guest, Jeremy Bittle. Jeremy and I have collaborated on several client projects to help improve their SEO knowledge, strategies, and overall digital presence. What makes Jeremy's approach unique is that he's not just about keywords and rankings. He takes a Google-first perspective, focusing on Search Console, site health, and the real mechanics of how search works. So I'm excited about this topic. I have plenty of questions for Jeremy. So Jeremy, welcome. Thanks for joining me today and sharing something I know you're passionate about, right?
Yeah.
SEO. So before we get started though, can you share with the audience a little bit about yourself and your general approach to SEO?
I'm a music producer, bartender turned SEO consultant. I've been consulting for about 9 years, almost 10 now. And all of those previous things kind of led up to incidentally being good at this job and working with brands and being able to talk to people and explain complex concepts to folks in understandable ways that came from bartending. The sort of creative ability mixed with technical ability, left and right brain type of cognition was really helpful to kind of hone in music and art. So put all those things together and you kind of have SEO consulting. After a lot of experimentation in the field over the past 9 years and working with a lot of clients over the past 9 years.
But I will say you probably have one of the most unique SEO backgrounds when you bring in the bartender and the musician part of it. So
for sure.
Yeah. So I certainly catch a sense of creativity as well as a sense of good temperament as a bartender.
Yep, bedside manner.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's great. So let's go ahead and get into this then. So I like to start with kind of this SEO mindset. And, most companies think SEO is about keywords and rankings. I know I did. And really just getting to the top of Google. And working with you, I sense that you really kind of have a different approach and mindset to this, and how you break down what SEO really is and how companies should think about it. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that mindset and your approach when it comes to that?
Yeah, it's really about shifting the way that we think about our websites and the quality of the information that we publish on them, the quality of the information that we're publishing to the web. You hear a lot about content quality from like Google search execs. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about content, but I'm talking about the quality of the information inside of that content. And I mean very specific things when I talk about information and the depth of which, or the breadth of which, very measurable concepts that maybe not this episode, but maybe another one we can pull open some of the data that I work with to talk about what we do to prove the factors that Google uses to assess the quality of information. The reason why I'm big on information is because it's in the name of the algorithm that Google is built around. It's built around information retrieval. That's what Google's search algorithm is. It's an information retrieval algorithm. And if you look that up, you can see that this is an industry. The retrieval of information, document retrieval, these kinds of concepts. This has been an industry since the 80s. And it's a big question. How does Google or any search engine create this library of information that's then indexed and then users can then query this database?
And to be clear, when we say information, I mean, I think, again, a lot of us think keywords, SEO, keywords, SEO. Right. And you're making a distinction here between keywords and information, correct?
Yeah, we're specifically trying to move away from talking about keywords, which is why I use Google Search Console primarily to basically assess the equity for a brand's organic channel, how much equity they have, what do they actually own. So keywords are tricky because they set bad expectations for brands and for companies and marketers. They've set bad KPIs because keywords are very lossy and you don't own keywords. What you own are pages on your website that, have information under these pages, under these URLs. And Google indexes these URLs as part of their information retrieval algorithm. And they serve these pages in search for topics that map to queries that, a user may search, you and me may search. And those keywords, you don't own that. You just own the information that Google may or may not be serving you in those searches for, if that makes sense, which is a fancy way of saying rank position or ranking. And I'm trying to use better verbiage that doesn't imply static ranking or static owned keywords. You don't own the keywords because Google, ranking is a very volatile world. And the reason why it's such a lossy KPI is because it's so volatile. So to manage your KPIs or manage success, expectations of success for a brand's marketing initiatives revolving around the organic channel around keyword ranking, it's a disaster.
And is it fair to say the reason we've gotten to where we have, because years ago, it used to be, I can remember people would just load their pages up, hide the words, and just literally just put hundreds of keywords on a page, right?
Yeah, black hat, keyword stuffing, these kinds of all kinds of black hat tactics like that, cloaking, all sorts of things that Google has now buttoned up.
Right.
They've finally made an algorithm, or they've added to the algorithm, I should say, over the years. They just keep adding to it and made it so that they plug a lot of the holes that black hats exploit. But additionally, they can get away with saying to the publishing community, because SEOs study this stuff, but also like publishers, like news organizations, and other folks, they study what the best practices are of SEO, even though they're maybe not necessarily SEO consultants. But it's very important to them, right? Large e-commerce websites, this is all very important to managing these things. Hopefully they have quality SEO consult of some kind. But right. The publishing community are the people that are listening to what the Google search execs are saying. And the search execs say, publish quality content, which sounds very subjective when you break that down. But they've gotten their algorithm engineered in such a way, it's not smart, but it's smart in very specific ways that can actually assess content quality over keyword stuffing, over some of the tactics that 10 years ago were very, hack of the week and, make client happy, make graph go up and to the right. And, for a short amount of time before ultimately it's not an equitable play, it's not an equitable strategy. So, all of this is to talk about strategy. This is why we position our consultancy as SEO strategic consulting as opposed to SEO services. Right. To me, this is the difference between those two things.
Yeah. And I think that kind of puts some of this in perspective too, which is important because I know the work I've done with you and clients, a big part of what we do is the education and having this type of conversation, right? Because I do think there's an expectation because there's so many companies out there that just offer SEO services as opposed to SEO strategies, right? And sometimes they disguise it as a strategy when all they're saying is, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and you can expect that. And again, that's why I think one of the things I liked about your approach is it's much more in depth. Certainly, it has a longer term play. And again, our focus, as you know, is almost exclusively organic with our clients. And I think that's where this really comes into play big time. So let me jump into the next topic here. And you kind of touched on it, but this whole Google Search Console, which quite honestly, to me, I was always a big search or Google Analytics guy and really introduced a Search Console through our work together and using that over keywords like we've just talked about. But how would you kind of summarize that to our audience? Because my guess is a lot of our audience they may have heard of Search Console, but they probably don't use it.
Yeah. So we're just talking about different tools with which to measure some kind of progress or measure equity, measure success for a project, and that project would be engaging with a brand or a company that has a marketing department of some sort. So this is what I use these tools I use to present equity to these folks. And, some of these kinds of brands are using this in-house. Maybe they're using Search Console, but they also might be kind of in the old world, the old SEO mindset of just keywords only. And they might be using a different tool. They might be using something in Moz or maybe Ahrefs or SEMrush, some of the more common rank tracking tools, and they assess their SEO success or their SEO equity around keywords that they track using a rank tracker. And without getting into the specifics of why those kinds of rank trackers are really lossy in a volatile environment, that rank tracking really is. I use Google Search Console, and like you mentioned, I use it over Google Analytics for mainly the reason why I don't get into GA4 much is because I hate GA4. Don't like what they did with it when they switched from Universal to 4. I still use Search Console primarily before that came out, but since they launched 4, I've deprecated the use of it internally entirely, and now I use primarily Search Console, and that's been fine.
And for people who don't know, just real quick, so it was Google Universal, which was their platform for years for Google
Yeah,
Analytics, and they moved to this completely new platform, GA4, and that's what we're talking about, right? And
yeah,
how they pull data and analyze it.
yeah, and how they present it, and it's very convoluted in the way that it was presented. And at the end of the day, analytics is another lane, in my opinion, to that of SEO and the kind of consulting that I do. Analytics is like the data analytics. That's a whole consultant's job. That's a whole other subject and it has a lot to do with sales. It has a lot to do with internal things inside of a brand, inside of a company that, it's just better addressed with with another conversation with someone with another line of expertise
Yeah.
that's prepared to engage with the brand's, sales department and understand turning these numbers into something more meaningful other than just data honestly, without meaning. So getting ahead of ourselves, the Search Console is where I go to assess a brand or a company's SEO equity by way of the visibility that their pages have. Like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to topical visibility, Google indexes a page on a website and you type in a keyword, Google maps that keyword back to okay, what does this keyword mean? You might say, I'm looking for pizza near me, and it's going to come up with all the synonyms to pizza, and it's going to come up with an understanding of maybe potentially what the search intent is, but I wouldn't follow that path too deeply because this machine can only understand so much. And then it's going to concatenate near me to where my search location is. So in this case, it's Rochester, New York. So it does a lot of things in the query processing phase, and then it's going to pull the result set for the search result page, and it's going to pull all the blue links that you see outside of the search features, outside of the AI overview, all the normal blue links. Those are all pages. They're not websites. It's not CNN.com. You're seeing CNN.com / news / whatever it is that you search for, and or something like that. It would be the article title, but likely there's some overlap between the article title and the keyword that you put in, at least topically speaking. Not necessarily keywords, but at least topically speaking, you should be able to look at the title and probably going to see something related topically to what you searched for. But again, those are pages. So in Search Console, what we can see is a very clear and concise breakdown of all the pages on someone's website that garner clicks in search and also garner impressions in search. And we can basically make an assessment very quickly as to where the equity lies on a website within its pages. So a lot of people say, oh, my traffic's down, but they don't realize that the traffic might be up and down based on the pages within the website. So there are pages that might be down within that. It's likely, like 90% of the time, when someone says my SEO traffic is down, that it's not just down across the whole website equally. It's usually localized to a few different URLs that might be performing, underperforming, or overperforming for certain topics, again, that map to different keywords. And so then we might use keywords as a KPI with a grain of salt to try to assess what's going on. But that's something that I do internally because I understand what I'm looking at when I look at the volatile world of keyword ranking. And then we translate that into what it means in terms of Search Console, what it means in terms of our information on these very specific areas of the site that might be underperforming. And so that's how we basically triage various situations using something like Search Console. Using more traditional rank tracking tools like Moz, I mean, good luck.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just
and they're not cheap either, typically.
no, they're not.
The
Right.
monthly
Search Console is
subscriptions
free.
that they have.
Yeah.
I was going to go back real quick. You mentioned, and we use this a lot, and there was a term that I picked up on with you on being topical
Yeah.
versus keywords, and it's really kind of changed how I think of SEO. just in those simple terms when it's topical. And can you just elaborate briefly on that and what that should mean to our audience when you talk about being topical?
Yeah. So just to try to describe a very complex concept, it's very important to what all this means as quickly as I can. To be topical is to address the topic in terms of the information that you're publishing about it, which I know is a very circular thing to say. But it's also to say that the keywords are important. The keywords are what you would imagine would be pretty one-to-one as far as what the topic is. Topics, pizza, keywords, pizza, right? That's the old way of thinking about keywords is pizza, the synonyms, pizzas,
Hot pizza, cold pizza,
hot
red
pizza, cold
pizza.
pizza. Yeah, exactly. Birthday pizza.
Right.
So pizza party. But there's another vector to the way that Google assesses the information that's published on a page. It's not just how many times do they say pizza. That's how it was 15 years ago. It was say pizza more often on your document, on the URL on the page, on the metadata, on the forward-facing content, stuff it all over the place. Get pizza, get your content, SEO content writer to have as much keyword density as possible. But Google, I theorize that this was around the Medic update a couple of years back, just maybe like 5 years back, is when they started integrating entities into the algorithm. And this is more bleeding edge SEO theory at this point in time. And another episode, we can dive into the data behind it if you'd like. But entities are super important. They're the related topics to that of the parent topic. So let's move from pizza to cake because I just use that more often. So with your keywords cake, maybe you're writing a cake recipe and you want, topical visibility in search. You're going to compete with all these other people writing about cake recipes. And realistically, this is probably going to be in the AEC industry, right? Like, so maybe it's not cake recipe, but it's something about a pain point that you're solving in
Sure.
your industry.
Right.
But we're going to call it a cake recipe for
We
for
get
the
the
parallel.
analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. Now your parent topic is cake and recipe, and your keywords are cake and recipe, and etc. You're going to say it's still important to say all of those things on the page, but you're not going to juice the keyword density up better than the guy next to you who you're trying to outrank just because his keyword density is higher. You want to really also make sure that you have this topical breadth and depth, and that is the entities. It's Google seeing all of the subtopics or related topics that is mentioned on the page. And sometimes it's just a mention of, I mean, wouldn't it be weird if you had a cake recipe, you didn't mention flour or birthday or frosting or obvious things that is integral to the concept of writing a rich piece of information about a cake recipe. Google has figured out a way to assess whether or not those pieces of information, those nouns effectively, are on the page. When they're not, they notice. So you can imagine across the entire internet, all of the folks that published a piece of content that was pretty thin, or maybe even just ignorant to that of how broad or deep their information is that they published. You can imagine all those folks that shrugged their shoulders and can't figure out why their cake recipe isn't ranking very well because they didn't really dive deep enough. It's very easy to forget to mention certain things in our industry. I'm probably doing this entire episode. I'm forgetting really basic things that your users might be needing, information that they might be needing because I'm so deep in the SEO industry. So I speak on it and I try to remember, where people are. But it's very easy to write, especially, and publish information or talk about it in a way that can be convoluted because we know our stuff so well. So it's my job as a consultant to come in when a subject matter expert has written on something and say, hey, like you're kind of bearing the lead here. You didn't mention frosting in this whole thing. And of course you're going to, what's a cake without frosting?
Right.
So this happens continuously as folks write content.
So Jeremy, the architecture of SEO, we in the design and build space, we focus a lot around good architecture. But when it comes to SEO, there's also good architecture. And
in real life buildings and then not in real life
yes,
websites.
yeah, exactly. So when we talk about that, we're really talking about good structure, right? So when it comes to SEO and a well-structured site and how that can affect your results with SEO, can you talk about kind of a couple key concepts perhaps that our audience can think about when they are structuring their site as related to SEO?
Yeah, sure. This could be a topic that we discuss for a whole episode, but to keep it short, I'd say, content organization is important. And you mentioned Google, that I take a Google first approach to SEO. I also take a user first approach to SEO. It's kind of like 50-50 in a lot of ways. And a well structured and architected website is one that's organized and easily navigated on by users, and that there's topical destinations for everything and not multiple topical destinations for anything. That's to say, if you want to see a well architected website, Wikipedia would be a great site to look through. There's one topic for one page. And if there's any muddiness, they have disambiguation and all that stuff, which, you and I, with our brands and websites and companies, we don't usually need to get into. And, they don't do part ones and part twos for their on their blog or anything of that nature, not that they have one, but point being, one page for one topic. And if you want, you're not going to publish information about that topic somewhere else without it also existing on the primary destination for that topic.
Yeah, I know you're an advocate of this because we focus a lot with our business and our clients on building authority and trust in the marketplace. And one of the ways we do that is we have a lot of content around problems that our client solves, right? Being solution oriented, which just by its nature, I believe helps create really good content as opposed to just talking product features or how great our product is. It's really like, it's almost less about the product, more about the solution.
Yeah.
And, is there, from your perspective, is there a connection there when you talk about not only being well organized and user experience, but the type of content that you're putting on the site for clients?
Yeah, I'd say sometimes you might approach it where these two concepts that you mentioned are one page, but there's also plenty of strategy for those two concepts to be two different types of pages, your products and your solutions. It just depends on how competitive the landscape is for the topic that you want to be visible for and compete for, because there's going to be lots of other folks in your market that also have pages about these things. So you got to look at that and decide if, is this going to be something that we need a separate page to target this solution, this pain point that you're solving, and orient the name of the page. The names of these pages are really important. So, when you're able to dedicate a page with its name being this solution that you offer, this pain point that you're solving, it might be a similar looking page to the product that you also offer, but you might have two pages. Although they're similar topics, they're not going to be named similarly in any capacity.
Right.
They'll be named what people search for when they're looking to have their pain point alleviated. But then the name of the product is forward on the product page, because some people might search for products in that way. When they search for the pain point, they might not know the name of the product yet.
Right.
Because it's that discovery sort of layer of the onion.
Well, and I think we do the same. I mean, our approach is, we want to, from a search engine optimization, when they are searching for solutions, once we bring them into our site, if we rank, we certainly talk about the solution, but then we certainly have a product page, right? It's like, okay, these are the products we offer, and these are the specs and the product details and all the information they need.
Yep.
But what we found is by talking about the problem and solution is how people find us. And
Yep.
then, like you said, there's certainly a natural navigation to the products once they realize, hey, these guys kind of know what they're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really about managing your website pages in a way that it's like an octopus. You just got all these tentacles, more than 8, probably. So I'm not sure what kind of octopus that is, but you have every new page is a new tentacle that is a potential doorway to be found in search. Every page is a doorway, and it's only so happens to be relevant in this particular industry that we're talking about pages for pain points and pages for solution for products, solutions versus products.
Right.
And I mean, it's common in a lot of other industries and types of websites to have this discussion, of course, but an e-commerce website is going to be, we're talking about different tentacles.
That's right. Yeah,
versus an industry blog, maybe a little bit different. So lots of different reasons to have pages on a website. And in this particular instance, in the industry in which we work, we talk about products versus solutions a lot.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because we want to make sure people know we focus in a very particular industry, and although some marketing initiatives and strategies and tactics can be carried over from industry to industry, there are very specific things in certain industries that you do a little bit different, right? And I've had comments from people who have used other agencies and they say, well, we worked with kind of a generalist agency. They didn't really know our industry,
Yeah, yeah.
and they just had a whole different approach than you guys do, and
Well,
so
I think that's
I
a
think there
great
is something to
reason
be said
for
for
us to
that.
work together. Sorry to interrupt, but I think this is really important. The reason why Shawn and I work together so well is because Shawn's the industry expert. And in SEO, I don't believe that industry expertise is important because what I deal with is just words and topics over here, matching that up with pages on a website and trying to get visibility for that. For instance, I work with I don't even know what to call them. They're like a they make physics tools for physicists, little electron guns and all kinds of, cathode emitters and vacuum chambers. I don't know what the heck it's about, but I've convinced them to create a library, a slice of their own Wikipedia selection of white papers, essentially long form articles that took all their PDFs that very convoluted and disorganized on the website, making a Wikipedia type resource for their company. And it's working beautifully because it's a very niche industry otherwise. And just ranking for electron gun is not just going to cut it alone.
Right.
So that all being said, SEO consult and expertise is agnostic to the topic. And Shawn is an industry expert. You've worked with in this field for decades, right? For
Yep. 20,
20?
27 years, I think I'm on.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a result, you match us up together and we have all of this expertise. It's my expertise is augmented by his expertise and can translate what's necessary for the project and for the strategy better. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Because folks that specialize in SEO industries, like, oh yeah, I work with dentists only. It's like, okay, cool. So now as an SEO, you relegated yourself to only that industry and those types of queries. And you're not learning about how other websites work. And as a result, you're not really understanding your slice of the internet very well. But
Yeah, it's a good point. And again, and to your point, I think it is why we've worked well together with clients because we are kind of bringing in the two experts of in our particular field. So, well, good. That's good patting on our back. So I like that.
yeah,
All right.
that's what
So
this is for, right?
let's move on to a couple other topics here. So I've got this idea of content versus technical SEO, and so there's often kind of like this debate going on about content-driven SEO and technical SEO. Where do you think most companies go wrong, and how should they balance the two?
We've talked a lot about content, and that's like a bucket. It's a vector of SEOs, initiatives, and whatnot. Another bucket is technical. They don't really work against each other, but they certainly work with each other in the sense that your content's over here, and there's a straw that Google's using to intake that content. And that straw is it's not well made. It's one of those paper straws that gets soggy very quickly. And I guess the point is that it has a lot of liabilities involved in that. This process of Google indexing the web, it's much different than I'll use the analogy just for lack of a better YouTube, um, also owned by Google, but you're uploading your content, you're uploading those videos directly to their database and using the fields by which they've created to, identify metadata and create the title, all this stuff. They've created a structured environment for you to upload directly to their database. They don't have to go and fetch it from the web. And there's the incredibly expensive endeavor it is to index the web and go and get information from us and the rest of the publishing community and all of the spam and black hat folks that have created a lot of bloat on the internet. The internet's an iceberg. We use a tip of it, and the rest of it, there's a huge amount of spam. And Google has to sort through all that stuff. One of the reasons why this straw has so many liabilities for which it can function properly, at least with help. So technical SEO is about the health of the website and the ability for Google to crawl it. And there are sometimes mysteries that don't go they're not sometimes not solvable in this bucket. There are just so many things that can go wrong. And I've only had maybe two in my career that were truly unsolvable, and then we just had to kind of move forward and strategize around, pages. There's just basically two pages that I couldn't get indexed into Google. One was on a Squarespace site, and one currently I'm working on a WordPress site. I chalked the first one up to Squarespace issues, which is a very common thing. There's too many unknown variables within an environment that I don't control with Squarespace, and an environment that I don't control, which is Google. And that's the thing, is that at the end of the day, I don't control Google. I study it, and I know a lot about it, and I've seen a lot of field data, and I've worked in the field for a long time. And so I'm very good at diagnosing issues. But, just like any doctor should probably also tell you, there are some mysteries with the human body that they have not solved either. And this kind of thing can happen. So the study of technical SEO is really a study of health of a website, and learning about these different ecosystems, how they interact, and the liabilities we're in. And yet, people's CMSs can really screw it up. The way that maybe even their WordPress site is set up can really screw it up. Changing CMSs, changing domains, changing, technology stacks, or even sometimes servers. These kinds of things can create technical problems because you're changing the ecosystem on which your site is built, and Google is used to crawling that. A lot of things can go wrong in this bucket.
So
Also,
do you have best practices when it comes to technical best practices when you're working with clients, or what's your approach with that?
I can really assess the health with using Search Console, but then also I use a tool to assess volatility of keyword positions. And without getting into that tool today, which I think we should get into maybe at another date, but I use these tools to basically triangulate what I would assess a website's health to be,
Okay.
mostly in Search Console.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of, you published a page about a thing. Is it visible in any capacity? Are we in the top 100? Within that rank position, are we very volatile in the top 100? Are we moving from position 80 to position 5 within a minute of doing the two searches together? You might pull open a search result and see yourself on page 1, but it might not be a stable page 1. You might be moving all around over time. And so these are functions of potential issues with technical health.
Which, by the way, when we do, I know we have one program, our 45-day program, where we're really teaching our client. And every week we have meetings and we show exactly what you're talking about. We're showing them the volatility, and we're showing them what's working and what's not. And which, one of the things I love about that is, again, we're kind of teaching the client
Yeah.
and showing them what's going on, the volatility. So it kind of changes their expectations, I think,
Mm-hmm.
if they do move forward with any type of SEO program, really understanding that I guess foundation, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. I think my and our most successful projects have always felt like more of a coaching
Yeah.
relationship. And we're coaching marketing teams, content teams, web developers, and then kind of being within that sort of between those two worlds that oftentimes don't talk to each other very well. The content marketers don't really talk with developers very often very well. I don't think they have common ground.
Right.
Um, and it's very often that these two sides of the business are just not communicating well. And I bring them together. I mean,
Yeah.
every website's different, and everyone built it differently and have a different relationship with their developer team or agency, or it's in-house, all
Yeah,
these
I tell
different
you,
things.
I don't know if I shared this story with you, but like about, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, I had a client, and this is before we really even got into SEO, and we did a new site. We outsourced it. We did a new site for a client. We wanted to get some SEO support. So we hired a company to do an audit, basically, and it was about a 4-week project. It was $15,000. They gave us a booklet that was almost 3 inches thick, just with a bunch of, copy and paste images and all this stuff. And they handed it to us. Say, here's your results. We had a 1 hour meeting to review it, and that was the project. And I'll never forget, after that, I said, this is almost like a scam, this whole SEO thing.
Yeah,
And that's why I love the fact that now that we are into SEO as much as we are, we bring people like you on with clients. the education part is just so important as opposed to just saying, hey, we'll do this, and this is what you're going to get, and then you run with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It, SEO is pure theory, so you're going to get a lot of different opinions from other folks. I mean, again, to bring it back to the sort of health or doctor analogy, not to paint myself with delusions of grandeur, but it's think about the SEO industry, and we're trying to approach this with a scientific mindset and actually develop real theories and then prove them. And the industry as a whole is kind of in the leeching and drilling holes in people's heads and just they're trying to do they'll do anything to try to figure out how to fix a website's
Yeah.
issue. And they'll like I said, it's an echo chamber. And so they come up with their ideas and they poorly peer review each other. And then, it just turns into this thing where they just come up with these truths and these best practices that are not always necessarily true or agreed upon by the next guy that you talk to. So when you go and get a second opinion, which I don't think someone shouldn't get a second opinion, but just understand that when you go to do that, you might get a wildly different one.
Right.
And so
Well,
you got to
I
really
can
think
I can
about,
attest I can attest to that because
yeah,
before we hooked up, I had met with probably six different SEO folks, and I'm telling you, everyone was completely different in their approach and the guarantees they were making, and I mean, it was really something, and I feel that I was somewhat knowledgeable in the space, and it was amazing just the difference from people's approach and beliefs on really how SEO works, right?
yeah, totally.
All right, so I'm going to keep us moving along as we kind of come to the end here or close to it. But I do want to touch on AI and Google algorithms and AI because this is on everybody's mind and everyone's talking about it and how it affects SEO and or doesn't affect SEO. Is ChatGPT taking over Google search? And so just give me your take on this. You and I have talked about this before a little bit, but just share with the audience kind of where you see this whole AI initiative going.
Yeah. So this is a huge topic. We could talk about it for hours, but obviously AI is changing a lot about what, search SEO, how SEO is conducted potentially, and also what SEO is. So anywhere from how content's produced to how people search on the web potentially could be changing. The AI overview somewhere in the middle that you see on Google. A lot that we could talk about. I think the hot take that I want to give you about AI is going to revolve around how it could potentially be changing the way that folks search on the web, right? Besides content production, that's kind of neither here nor there in some ways, so long as you're making informational content, thumbs up. AI overviews are very interesting. But when the potential for ChatGPT to take over market share of searchers, or within the search industry over Google, I think it's a pretty real thing. And at the very least, we want to be inside those AI overviews that Google is producing in the first place. I think that that's what Google is. One way that Google is trying to keep market share from moving to ChatGPT is honestly just designing their search result to look like it's AI driven, because it always has been AI driven before ChatGPT. So really, I think that's a facelift. Regardless, if a searcher goes to ChatGPT and asks a question about your industry, you want to be part of the answer, right? And at least be cited in the sources for the AI overviews. And I think ChatGPT does the citations as well, or any other AI tool. We want to be in those. So what's the commonality? Like, how are we going to get visibility out of ChatGPT now? Well, luckily, it's the same effing thing. It's still information retrieval. It's still information depth and breadth. It's just a different corpus and a different, actually, it's the same corpus, because trust me, ChatGPT is not launching an indexation initiative. They're using Google's corpus. So that's one way that SEO is not, as we know it, is not going to die the same way that people are going to say that it's dying when ChatGPT does take market share from Google, is that ChatGPT is not going to index the web. So definitely remember that when you see
Wait a minute. So just so I'm clear, you're saying Google will continue to index and ChatGPT is going to be using Google's index. So the SEO efforts are still valuable regardless if you're finding the info on chat
yeah,
or okay.
we'll be then doing technical SEO on Google's side the same way we're doing it now. And if say everything changes to ChatGPT, then we'll be studying relevancy algorithms, information relevancy algorithms rather than only retrieval algorithms from ChatGPT's side. So to that end, again, it's just appeasing a different entity. Maybe not the right word to use because we're entities is something else. We're appeasing a different company, a different group. Instead of appeasing Google, we're appeasing ChatGPT in terms of how broad and how deep our information is that we publish. And trust, we're getting good results from visibility in ChatGPT and in the AI overviews by executing the same exact strategies that we use for rank position and visibility we're in on the Google side. So the rising tide is lifting all boats by the way that we do SEO, because we do SEO, focus on the long term and what's best for the client and the information we're in.
Yeah, well, that's good. It seems like every day I'm talking to somebody about AI and, what's going on with SEO and, the dominance in the marketplace with Google. And my short answer, even shorter than yours, is listen, at the end of the day, we still want to provide good content that solves problems, that's going to be meaningful to our target audience, right? And kind of let the rest of the stuff take care of itself, because I think if we work on that foundation, we're going to be in a good place, right? Now, there are certainly tweaks and things that from a technical standpoint that we'll need to understand and work on, but we still want to focus on our end, good content, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So with that, Jeremy, this has really been a great discussion. I think we've got like 3 more podcasts as a follow-up, just
Yeah, for sure.
all the in-depth information that we can obtain from this discussion. But
It'd be cool if we did like a live audit together, like we both go in on a site and just go in and do our own little audit and put it up, and then people can kind of see what we do to tear apart a website.
Yeah, and maybe that would make a good, maybe not even a podcast, just a good video for people to see and to learn that process. So
like and subscribe if you want to see more content like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So let me wrap this up then. I think hopefully a lot of companies in the architectural space will walk away with a much clearer understanding of how SEO really works and what they should focus on moving forward. Before we wrap up, I just want to, and I always ask this, is there anything that I didn't ask you that the client's audience might have interest in or have value in beyond all the topics we didn't talk about in this discussion?
Well, we covered a lot. I mean, I think we even covered 2025 and beyond at this point when it comes to trends. I think we covered everything that I would want to say, when it comes to content, information, AI, and content organization. I think we're good. I think we're covered.
And I think for us and for our audience, you always got to have the call to action, right? And for us, the call to action here is if you guys do want to learn more, want to talk further with Jeremy and myself about SEO, we'd be more than happy to schedule a Zoom or Teams call, free consultation, no commitment, but kind of talk through what your situation is and perhaps shed a light on what you could be doing that can help your SEO, whether we work with you guys or not. So that's an open invitation. That's our call to action. And for those of you that are listening and found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe to the Donovan Digital Podcast. This is something we're excited about. It's new for us. We're going to bring more content and discussions related to how you can help build your awareness in the industry, to the architectural community, help engage architects, and grow your influence in the design and build industry. So with that concludes this episode of Donovan Digital Podcast. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks.